Edward Langley's $200,000 watch glinted as he leaned toward Lena Carter, his smile a blade in the Manhattan ballroom's golden haze. "You're one of the special girls for after the party, aren't you?" he said, voice low, dripping with entitlement. The CEO of Langley Enterprises, 42 and cloaked in a $400 million fortune, mistook her cleaner's uniform for something else entirely. "Name your price." Lena froze, her rag poised over a wine-stained marble floor, the gala champagne clinks fading. Her pulse surged, not with fear, but with a fire kindled in the Bronx, where she'd learned to face scorn. She rose, meeting his gaze with a steadiness that made him falter. "Mr. Langley," she said, her voice clear, educated, slicing through his presumption. "I clean floors, not sell truths you can't afford." His smile twitched, confidence shaken by her poise. The crowd nearby, senators' wives, Wall Street titans, stirred, their laughter sharp as glass. To them, Lena was invisible, a black woman in a uniform, a prop in their gilded world. Edward's eyes narrowed, his hand dipping into his pocket to pull a crisp $100 bill. "For the embarrassment, sweetheart," he said, loud enough for all to hear, tossing it at her feet. "When you change your mind, I'm at the Pierre. 300 an hour's fair." The bill fluttered to the floor, a final insult. Lena didn't flinch. Her eyes locked on his, a storm behind their calm. She saw her mother, humiliated, fired, their home lost to a man like this. The memory was a blade, but Lena wielded it differently. "Some prices are paid in truth, not dollars," she whispered to herself, a vow forged from years of watching power crush the powerless. Her hand brushed the worn journal in her apron, its coded pages holding secrets these elites would never suspect. She tucked the rag into her apron, turned, and walked away, her steps deliberate. Edward laughed with his cronies, boasting of putting her in her place. But Lena paused at the ballroom's edge. She pulled out her journal, scribbling a single line in her coded script. "Tonight, he paid in arrogance. Tomorrow, he'll pay in truth." The gala spun on, its chandeliers casting light on a woman who just declared war on its king. As the crowd's chatter resumed, Lena's heart beat steady, her mother's face flickering in her mind, a maid broken by men like these. What had Edward Langley unleashed in the woman he'd dismissed? Lena Carter's shoes echoed on the creaky stairs of her Bronx apartment, the weight of Edward Langley's $100 bill still burning in her mind. Hours ago, at the Manhattan Gala, he'd tossed it at her feet, his voice dripping with entitlement. 300 an hour's fair! The laughter of the elite, senators' wives, Wall Street titans had followed her out, but her final journal entry lingered. "Tonight, he paid in arrogance. Tomorrow, he'll pay in truth." She shut the door, the city's hum a faint pulse beyond the walls, and faced a faded photo on her table. Her mother, Grace, in a maid's uniform, her smile weary but unbroken. Grace's voice filled Lena's head, a lesson from childhood. "They'll overlook you, Lena. Use that. See the unseen." At 26, Lena had turned those words into a weapon. By night, she scrubbed floors at galas like Edward's, her cleaner's uniform a cloak of invisibility. By day, she ran Carter Analytics, a corporate auditing firm that made executives sweat. Her dual life was deliberate, born from a vow made at 16, when Grace was fired by a wealthy landlord for refusing his advances. Accused of theft, Grace lost her job, and they lost their home, relegated to her cousin Maya's couch. Lena had stood helpless, tears in her eyes, as Grace whispered, "They think you're nothing, everything." That pain had forged Lena's mission, to expose the truths hidden by men like Edward Langley, CEO of Langley Enterprises, whose $400 million empire was rumored to thrive on dirty deals. Lena sat at her small wooden table, the photo of Grace watching over her. She opened her worn journal, its coded pages a map of secrets gathered from years of blending into elite circles. As a cleaner, she was invisible, privy to careless whispers of fraud and corruption. A recent entry burned in her mind. Langley event, government contract, inflated costs, Senator Klein tied. Edward's insult had confirmed her suspicions about Langley Enterprises. His smug "name your price" wasn't just personal. It was a symptom of a system that silenced the powerless. She wouldn't let it stand. Her phone buzzed, Maya's name lighting the screen. "You okay after that creep?" Maya asked, her voice warm, carrying memories of late-night talks in her Harlem apartment, dreaming of justice over tea. Lena pictured Maya's kind eyes, her unwavering support since their eviction days. "He thinks he broke me," Lena said, her voice steady, "but he just lit the fuse." She crossed to her corner desk, a makeshift office cluttered with financial reports and a laptop glowing with Langley Enterprises filings. Lena's "see the unseen" philosophy was her edge. She had a knack for spotting patterns others missed. Budget discrepancies, coded emails, gala chatter revealing more than intended. Cleaning a Langley boardroom late one night, she'd overheard executives discuss creative terminations for minority staff who didn't fit the culture. She jotted it in her journal, a thread to unravel Edward's empire. Lena's fingers grazed Grace's photo, her mother's tired eyes a reminder of dignity worn thin but never broken. At Columbia University, Lena had clawed her way to a business administration degree, working 3 jobs, cleaning offices, tutoring, waitressing, while classmates networked at frat parties. She graduated top of her class, but corporate doors stayed shut, seeing only her skin and roots. So she built Carter Analytics, turning invisibility into power. Edward's mistake was underestimating her, thinking a black woman from the Bronx was a prop to be mocked. Her heart raced as she opened Langley's latest report on her laptop. A $10 million government contract jumped out, its payments funneled through a shell company linked to Senator Klein's campaign. This was the crack in Edward's armor. The apartment was quiet, the city's hum a distant murmur. Lena's mind flashed to that eviction night, sleeping on Maya's couch, vowing to fight back. Grace had taught her growing the unseen in actions: greed, lies, arrogance. Edward's $100 bill was a mirror of his power to crush those beneath him. But Lena wasn't Grace, helpless against a landlord. She was a predator, patient and precise. Maya called again, her voice soft. "You're fighting for Aunt Grace," she said, "for all of us." "I know," Lena replied, standing, Grace's photo steadying her. The gala was a spark. Now she'd light a fire. But how would she turn one man's cruelty into a reckoning for an empire built on lies? Lena Carter's resolve burned as she left her Bronx apartment, the echo of Edward Langley's insult, 300 an hour's fare, fueling her steps. Her journal, tucked in her bag, held the coded spark from last night's gala, a government contract tied to Senator Klein, a crack in Langley Enterprises' armor. But as she boarded the subway, her phone buzzed with a voicemail that stopped her cold. It was Sarah, her supervisor at the cleaning agency, her voice tight with unease. "Lena, I'm sorry. Langley's office called. They're blacklisting you from all high-profile events. They said you were inappropriate." The words hit like a slap. Edward's $100 bill flashing in her mind, tossed at her feet before the gala's smirking elite. Lena's grip tightened on the subway pole, her reflection flickering in the window. A black woman in a worn coat, invisible to the world but not to herself. She saw her mother, Grace, fired for refusing a landlord's advances, their home lost to lies. Edward wasn't just humiliating her. He was trying to erase her livelihood, wielding his $400 million fortune like a club. Her heart pounded, a mix of rage and a flicker of doubt. Could she take on a man this powerful? At Carter Analytics' modest office, a rented room above a deli, Lena sat at her cluttered desk, Grace's photo steadying her. She replayed Sarah's voicemail, catching a hesitant note. "They suggested you reconsider your professional priorities."
The implication was vile. Edward was pushing her toward desperation, as if she'd crawl to his suite at the Pierre. Lena's jaw clenched. She'd seen this before, men like him crushing those who dared defy them. But Grace's words echoed, "See the unseen." Edward's attack wasn't just personal. It was a symptom of Langley Enterprises' rot. She opened her laptop, pulling up the government contract. The numbers screamed fraud. $10 million for infrastructure, funneled through a shell company linked to Klein's campaign. But another file caught her eye, an internal Langley memo leaked by an anonymous source, outlining cultural fit terminations targeting minority employees. Lena's breath caught. This was bigger than her humiliation. Workers like her, Black, Latino, Asian, were being systematically pushed out, their complaints buried. She scribbled in her journal, "Langley's not just arrogant, he's a predator." Her phone rang again. It was Maya, her cousin, her voice a lifeline from Harlem. "Lena, I heard about the blacklist. You okay?" Lena pictured Maya's warm kitchen, where they'd shared dreams of justice. "He thinks he's won," she said, her voice steady but tight. "He's wrong." Maya paused, then asked, "What's your next move?" Lena glanced at Grace's photo, her mother's tired eyes urging her on. "I fight," she said, "for all of us."
Lena's mind raced. She'd taken the gala job to infiltrate Langley's world, but Edward's retaliation raised the stakes. She needed evidence, hard proof to expose his empire's corruption. Her see the unseen philosophy had taught her to listen where others didn't. Cleaning Langley's offices, she'd overheard executives boast of cleaning house to keep the company pure. Each snippet was a thread, and she'd weave them into a noose. She spent the day digging, cross-referencing the contract with public records. A name emerged, Pinnacle Solutions, the shell company, tied to a Langley subsidiary. Her pulse quickened. This was the key. But doubt crept in. Edward's influence reached far. Senators, investors, media. Could Carter Analytics, a one-woman operation, challenge that? She thought of Grace, evicted, broken, but defiant. Lena wasn't helpless. She'd built her firm to expose men like him, using their underestimation as her weapon. That evening, Lena slipped into a Langley charity dinner as a temp caterer, her uniform again her cloak. The ballroom glittered, but she saw the unseen. Executives whispering about problem employees, their eyes sliding past her. She served champagne, her ears catching a name, Klein, tied to a discreet payment. She jotted it in her journal, her hand steady despite her racing heart. A guest brushed past, spilling wine on her apron. "Watch it, girl," he muttered, echoing Edward's scorn. Lena smiled tightly, her resolve hardening. They saw a servant, she saw a battlefield. Back home, Lena sat with Grace's photo, the memory of their eviction night raw. She'd been 16, curled on Maya's couch, vowing to fight back. Now Edward's blacklist threatened her income, her mission. But his cruelty was a misstep. He'd underestimated her, just as Grace's boss had. Lena opened her laptop, the contract's numbers glowing. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for every worker silenced, every voice dismissed. Maya called again, her voice soft. "You're carrying Aunt Grace's fire," she said. Lena nodded, her throat tight. "And it's going to burn." The gala's insult was a spark, the blacklist a flame. But could Lena turn this fire into a blaze that would consume Edward Langley's empire? Lena Carter's boots crunched on the icy Bronx sidewalk, her breath fogging in the dawn chill as she replayed Sarah's voicemail. "Langley's blacklisting you. They suggested you reconsider your professional priorities." Edward Langley's attack wasn't just a slight, it was a calculated strike to break her, echoing the cruelty that cost her mother, Grace, their home years ago. Lena's hand brushed her journal, its coded note about Langley Enterprises' shady contract burning in her mind.
Senator Klein, Pinnacle Solutions, $10 million. She'd infiltrated their charity dinner last night, catching whispers of discreet payments. But Edward's blacklist now threatened her access and her income. At Carter Analytics' cramped office above the deli, the smell of pastrami mingling with ink, Lena sat at her desk, Grace's photo anchoring her. Her laptop glowed with Langley's financials, the $10 million contract a neon sign of fraud. But the leaked memo haunted her most. Cultural fit terminations targeting minority employees. She'd seen the pattern in her journal: names, dates, hushed boardroom talks of cleaning house. This wasn't just about her. It was about workers like Maria, a Latina janitor fired after questioning unpaid overtime, or Jamal, a black analyst demoted for attitude. Edward's empire thrived on silencing them. Her phone buzzed. It was Maya, her cousin, her voice a warm tether from Harlem. "Lena, you're not giving up, right?" Maya asked, her tone laced with worry. Lena pictured their late-night talks, dreaming of justice over tea. "Never," she said, her voice steel. "He's not just coming for me. He's coming for everyone like us." Maya's sigh carried pride. "Your Aunt Grace's fire." Lena's resolve hardened, but Edward's next blow landed hard. An email from Sarah arrived. "Langley's team contacted our clients. They're calling you a troublemaker. 2 events canceled." Her stomach knotted. Edward wasn't content with blacklisting her from his galas. He was poisoning her reputation, choking Carter Analytics' lifeline. She saw Grace's face, evicted for defiance, her dignity worn thin. Doubt crept in. Could she outmaneuver a man with senators in his pocket? But Grace's words cut through. See the unseen. Edward's cruelty was a misstep, exposing his fear. He knew she'd heard too much. Lena dove deeper, her fingers flying over her laptop. The Pinnacle Solutions shell company led to a web of offshore accounts, one linked to a Langley subsidiary.
Quick referencing her journal notes, Lena traced payments to a consulting firm owned by a Klein associate. The memo's language, "eliminate cultural misfits," matched complaints she'd found online from former Langley employees, their stories buried by legal threats. Edward's empire wasn't just corrupt, it was a machine of exclusion, crushing anyone who didn't fit his vision of power. That afternoon, Lena slipped into another Langley event as a temp caterer, her uniform her cloak of invisibility. The ballroom glittered, chandeliers casting light on diamond-clad elites. She moved silently, pouring wine, her ears tuned to every word. A Langley executive, his tie loosened by bourbon, bragged to a colleague about streamlining staff to keep things clean. Lena's pulse raced, quickened, another thread in her journal, another problem employee fired without cause. She scribbled the name in her coded script. Exec 1, termination without cause. The crowd's murmurs faded as she recalled Maria's tearful exit, Jamal's forced demotion. Lena's hand trembled, but she kept pouring, her see the unseen philosophy guiding her. She caught a name, Pinnacle Solutions, and linked it to the fraudulent contract. This was no coincidence. Edward's system was built to silence. She returned home, the sting of Edward's blacklist sharp in her chest. Lena sat with Grace's photo, her mother's tired eyes a silent urging. She'd spent years cleaning their messes, learning their secrets. Now, Edward's vendetta was personal, but it was also a crack in his armor. She opened her laptop, the screen glowing with damning evidence, the Pinnacle contract, the termination memo, a pattern of discrimination stretching years. Lena's breath caught, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for Grace, for Maria, for Jamal, for every silenced voice. Maya's voice echoed from their last call. "You're carrying Aunt Grace's fire." Lena nodded, her throat tight.
She'd turned invisibility into power, and Edward Langley would learn that truth was more powerful than money. As the gala spun on, Lena stood still, her journal a silent vow. She wasn't broken, she was unstoppable, and Langley Enterprises would feel her fire.
Lena Carter's fingers trembled as she locked her Bronx apartment, Edward Langley's blacklist tightening like a noose. His campaign to ruin her, smearing her as a troublemaker, choking Carter Analytics contracts, had left her office above the deli quieter than ever. The sting of his 100 bill, tossed at her feet at the gala, burned alongside the evidence in her journal. A fraudulent $10 million contract tied to Senator Klein. A Langley memo targeting minority employees for cultural fit terminations. Lena's see the unseen philosophy had uncovered a pattern of corruption, but Edward's power, $400 million, senators in his pocket, loomed large. Doubt gnawed at her. Could one woman bring down an empire? She sat at her cluttered desk, Grace's photo a steady anchor. Her mother's words, "They think you're nothing, but you're everything," pushed back the fear. Lena wasn't just a cleaner scrubbing floors at Langley's events. She was the founder of Carter Analytics, a firm feared for exposing corporate fraud. Her dual life, uniform by night, auditor by day, was her weapon, built on years of listening to executives who dismissed her as invisible. Her signature technique, cross-referencing casual chatter with financial data, had cracked cases others missed. Now, Langley Enterprises was her target, and Edward's cruelty had made it personal. Her phone buzzed, Maya's name glowing. "You're still fighting, right?" her cousin asked, her Harlem warmth cutting through the chill. Lena pictured their late-night talks, Grace's memory binding them. "Always," she said, her voice firm. "He's not just hurting me, he's hurting everyone like us." Maya's pride was palpable. "Your Aunt Grace's fire." Lena needed an ally. She scrolled through her contacts, landing on James Monroe, a 45-year-old black lawyer who'd battled corporate giants. James had lost a friend to Langley's creative terminations, a personal wound that drove his crusade against discrimination. She'd read about his cases, taking down CEOs with airtight evidence, and met him briefly at a community event. Her fingers hesitated, then dialed. "James, it's Lena Carter," she said, voice steady. "I need to talk about Langley Enterprises. I've got something big." They met at a quiet Bronx cafe, the smell of espresso grounding the tension. James's eyes, sharp with grief and resolve, studied her. "You're the cleaner from the gala," he said, not a question. Lena nodded, sliding her journal across the table. "I'm also Carter Analytics. Look." She showed him the coded notes, Pinnacle Solutions, Klein's campaign, the termination memo. James's jaw tightened as he flipped through, pausing at a name, his friend, fired for attitude. "This is personal for me," he said, voice low. "Langley's been untouchable. How did you get this?" Lena's lips curved, a spark of defiance. "They talk when they think you're nobody. I listen." She explained her method, blending into Langley's events, catching whispers of fraud, cross-referencing with public records. James leaned back, impressed. "You're not just a cleaner, you're a damn predator." The twist came that evening. Lena, back at her desk, got an email from an anonymous source, a former Langley employee, fired for questioning the Pinnacle contract. Attached was a bombshell, an internal email from Edward to Klein promising discreet funding from mutual interests. Lena's heart raced. This wasn't just fraud, it was bribery, tying Edward's empire to political corruption. She called James, her voice urgent. "We've got him. This could bring down Langley Enterprises." James arrived, his briefcase stuffed with legal files. "This is enough for a federal lawsuit," he said, scanning the email. "But we need more. Witnesses, records." Lena nodded, her mind racing. "I'll go back in," she said. "Temp work at their next event. They won't see me coming."
James's eyes held hers, a shared fire. We're not just taking down Edward, we're dismantling his system. That night, Lena slipped into another Langley fundraiser, her caterer's uniform her shield. The ballroom dazzled, but she saw the unseen, executives clinking glasses, their smiles masking greed. She moved silently, pouring wine, catching a snippet about cleaning up loose ends. Her journal filled with coded notes, her hand steady despite the risk. A guest bumped her, muttering, "Stay out of the way." Lena's smile was tight, her resolve iron. Edward thought he'd crushed her, but he'd only sharpened her claws. Back home, Lena sat with Grace's photo, her mother's eyes urging her on. The blacklist, the smears, they were Edward's weapons, but they'd backfired. She wasn't broken. She was building a case that would burn his empire to ash. James's words echoed, "We're dismantling his system." Lena's fingers traced the photo, her heart steady. She'd turned invisibility to power, and Edward Langley would learn the cost of underestimating her.
Lena Carter's pulse thrummed as she stepped into the Langley Enterprises corporate gala, her caterer's uniform a shield against the glittering crowd. Edward Langley's blacklist had cut her from high-profile events, but a temp agency's last-minute call slipped her back into his world. Her journal, tucked in her apron, held the bombshell from days ago, an email tying Edward to Senator Klein's campaign with discreet funding. Now, with James Monroe, the lawyer hell-bent on dismantling Langley's corruption, Lena was hunting for the final pieces to bury Edward's $400 million empire. The ballroom pulsed with wealth, chandeliers casting diamond light, champagne flutes clinking like a hymn to privilege. Lena moved silently, pouring wine, her see the unseen philosophy sharpening her senses. She'd built Carter Analytics on this, catching whispers executives thought safe, cross-referencing them with hard data. Edward's $100 tossed at her feet weeks ago burned in her memory, as did his smears ruining her firm's contracts. But the stakes were bigger now. A fraudulent $10 million contract, a memo targeting minority employees, and bribery linking Langley Enterprises to Washington. Her phone had buzzed that morning with Maya's voice, warm from Harlem. "You're risking a lot, Lena," her cousin said, worry threading her words. Lena pictured their late-night talks, Grace's photo binding them. "It's for Aunt Grace," she replied, her voice steady. "For everyone they've silenced." Maya's silence held pride. "You're her fire." Lena's eyes scanned the room, landing on Edward, his tuxedo crisp, his smile a blade as he smoothed with Senator Klein. Her journal already held damning notes: Pinnacle Solutions, the shell company funneling funds, and termination complaints from workers like Maria and Jamal. Tonight, she needed more: records, names, proof to make James's lawsuit airtight. She glided past a table, catching a Langley executive's slurred boast. "Klein's in our pocket, the contract's just the start." Lena's pen scratched in her journal, her hand steady despite her racing heart. At Carter Analytics' office earlier, James had spread files across her desk, Grace's photo watching over them. "This email's a start," he'd said, his voice tight with the pain of his friend's firing. "But we need documents, memos, payments." Lena had nodded, her mind flashing to Grace's eviction, her mother's dignity crushed by a landlord's lies. "I'll get them," she said, her resolve iron. Doubt lingered. Edward's reach was vast, but Grace's words cut through. "Make them see." Now, in the gala's chaos, Lena spotted her chance. A Langley VP, tie loosened by bourbon, left his briefcase unguarded. She slipped behind a pillar, heart pounding, and nudged the case open with her foot. Inside gleamed a folder labeled Pinnacle Klein. Her fingers grazed it, extracting a page, a payment schedule, $2 million to Klein's associate, signed by Edward. She pocketed it, her breath shallow, but a guard's shout froze her. "Hey, you!" his eyes narrowing.
"Just cleaning," she said, flashing a smile, her apron hiding the page. He waved her off, but her knees shook.
Lena returned to serving, the paper burning against her skin. She caught another snippet, Klein discussing loyalty bonuses with Edward's CFO, their laughter echoing the memo's cold phrase, cultural fit. Her journal filled, but fear spiked. If caught, she'd lose everything, her firm, her safety. She saw Grace's face, tired but unbroken, and steadied herself. She wasn't just a cleaner, she was a predator, and Edward's arrogance was her prey. James met her post-gala in a shadowed Bronx park, the city's hum a distant pulse. He scanned the stolen page, his jaw tight. "This is dynamite," he said. "Payments, signatures, Klein's name, it's enough to trigger a federal probe." Lena nodded, but her hands clasped Grace's hands, as if her mother's strength anchored her own. "There's more out there," she said. "I'm going back in." James's eyes held hers, a shared fire. "We're not just after Edward, we're after his whole damn system." The next day, Lena dug deeper at her office, cross-referencing the stolen page with her journal. Pinnacle's payments matched complaints from fired employees, bonuses withheld, wages slashed. A pattern emerged. Langley's fraud funded its discrimination, a machine crushing workers like Maria, Jamal, and James's friend. Lena's chest tightened, doubt creeping in. Could she and James topple this Goliath? But Grace's eviction night flashed, 16, on Maya's couch, vowing to fight. She wasn't helpless now. That night, Lena slipped into another Langley event, her uniform her armor. The crowd's chatter masked her steps as she served, catching a CFO's mutter about burying complaints. She scribbled it, her hand trembling. A guest bumped her, wine splashing her apron. "Watch it," he snapped, echoing Edward's scorn. Lena's smile was iron, her resolve a blade. Edward thought he'd silenced her with his blacklist, but every step brought her closer to his ruin. Back home, Lena sat with Grace's photo, her mother's eyes urging her on. The stolen page, her journal, James's files, they were a bonfire waiting to ignite. Edward's empire was cracking, and Lena's fire would burn it down, for Grace, for the silenced, for truth. Lena Carter's heart pounded as she sat in her Bronx apartment, the stolen Langley Enterprises document, a payment schedule tying Edward Langley to Senator Klein's campaign, glowing on her laptop. Her journal, thick with coded notes from gala infiltrations, held more. A $10 million fraudulent contract, a memo targeting minority employees, whispers of discreet funding. James Monroe, her lawyer ally, had called it dynamite, enough for a federal probe. Edward's blacklist and smears had tried to break her, but Lena's see the unseen philosophy had turned his arrogance into her weapon. Tonight, they'd light the fuse. At Carter Analytics' cramped office, the deli's pastrami scent lingering, Lena and James huddled over strategy. Grace's photo watched from the desk, her mother's eyes urging Lena on. "We leak the email and payment schedule to a journalist," James said, his voice steady but fierce, fueled by the loss of his friend to Langley's firings. "Then we file a $50 million lawsuit, fraud, bribery, discrimination." Lena nodded, her fingers trembling. Edward's $100 bill, tossed at her feet at the gala, flashed in her mind. This wasn't just for her. It was for Grace, Maria, Jamal, every silenced worker. Lena hesitated, her throat tight. "Going public means they'll come for me," she said, picturing Edward's reach, senators, media, threats. James met her eyes, his resolve mirroring hers. "They're already coming for you," he said. "Let's hit first." She saw Grace's eviction night, 16, on Maya's couch, vowing to fight. Doubt faded. Fire took its place. "Do it," she said. They chose Rachel Newen, a journalist known for exposing corporate greed. Lena met her in a shadowed Manhattan cafe, the clink of cups masking their words.
Rachel's eyes widened as she scanned the email, payment schedule, and memo. "This is a nuke," she whispered. "Langley's untouchable, or was." Lena's journal notes sealed the deal. Names, dates, overheard boasts tying Klein to Pinnacle Solutions. Rachel's pen flew. "I'll run it tomorrow. Hashtag Langley exposed is gonna trend." Lena's phone buzzed as she left. Maya, her cousin, her voice warm from Harlem. "You sure about this?" Maya asked, worry threading her words. Lena pictured their tea-fueled dreams of justice. "For Aunt Grace," she said, her voice firm. "For us." Maya's pride was a lifeline. "Burn it down." The next morning, Rachel's article hit like a thunderbolt. Headlined Langley Enterprises, Fraud, Bribery, and Bigotry, it detailed the $10 million contract, Edwards' email to Klein, and the termination memo. Social media erupted. Hashtag Langley exposed trending nationwide. Posts quoting Edwards' gala recording, captured by Lena. 300 an hour's fare. The clip, leaked anonymously, went viral, his smug voice a death knell. Protests swelled outside Langley's Manhattan headquarters, signs reading, "Justice for the Silenced."
Lena watched the news from her office, Grace's photo steadying her. Edwards' face, pale on CNN, stammered denials as investors fled, his $400 million fortune hemorrhaging. Senator Klein resigned, citing personal reasons, his campaign crumbling under scrutiny. James called, his voice electric. "Federal agents raided Langley's offices. We did it." Lena's chest tightened, relief mixing with fear. She'd turned invisibility into power, but the backlash loomed. That evening, Lena slipped into a Langley event. One last infiltration, her caterer's uniform her armor. The mood was grim, executives whispering of layoffs, their arrogance shattered. She overheard a CFO mutter, "Edwards done, we're next." Lena's journal stayed empty. She didn't need it anymore. The truth was out, burning through Langley's facade. A guest bumped her, muttering, "Clumsy." Lena's smile was iron, her fire unyielding. Back home, Lena sat with Grace's photo, her mother's tired eyes a silent triumph. She'd been 16 when Grace was fired, their home lost to a landlord's lies. Now, Edwards' empire was ash, fines piling up, lawsuits mounting, his name a pariah. Lena's phone buzzed, Maya again. "You're trending too," Maya said, pride bursting. "They're calling you a hero." Lena shook her head, her throat tight. Not a hero, just Grace's daughter. The TV blared. Langley Enterprises stock plummeted, its board resigning en masse. Lena's laptop pinged with emails, clients returning to Carter Analytics, inspired by her stand. She thought of Maria, Jamal, James's friend, workers whose stories fueled her fight. Edward had underestimated her, seeing only a cleaner, a black woman from the Bronx. But Lena had seen the unseen, his greed, his lies, his system of oppression. She'd wielded truth like a blade, and it cut deep. Lena stood, Grace's photo in her hands. The gala's insult, the blacklist, the smears, they'd been Edward's weapons, but they'd forged her resolve. Carter Analytics would rise, a beacon for the silenced. As protests roared outside Langley's ruins, Lena's fire burned bright, a legacy of justice, for Grace, for all who'd been crushed by power. Lena Carter stood in her Bronx apartment, the morning light filtering through a frayed curtain, casting a glow on Grace's photo. The news blared from her small TV. Langley Enterprises collapses under federal fines. Edward Langley resigns in disgrace. His $400 million empire, built on fraud, bribery, and discrimination, was ash. The viral hashtag Langley Exposed campaign, sparked by Rachel Nguyen's article and Lena's gala recording of Edwards' 300 an hour's fare, had ignited a firestorm. Protests had raged, investors fled, and Senator Klein's resignation sealed the ruin. Lena's journal, once heavy with coded secrets, now rested on her table, its work done. At Carter Analytics above the deli, the phone rang non-stop, clients returning, inspired by her stand. Lena sat at her desk, Grace's photo anchoring her, as James Monroe burst in, his grin wide. "We won, Lena," he said, tossing a legal brief on her desk. $50 million lawsuit settled, Langley's board is gutted, and the feds are probing deeper. His eyes, once shadowed by the loss of his friend to Langley's firings, shone with victory. Lena nodded, her throat tight. Edward's blacklist and smears had tried to break her, but her see the unseen philosophy had turned his arrogance into his undoing. She thought of the gala, Edward's 100 bill at her feet, his voice dripping with entitlement. She'd been invisible then, a black woman from the Bronx, a cleaner to be mocked. But Lena had seen the unseen, his fraudulent $10 million contract, his bribery with Klein, his memo silencing workers like Maria and Jamal. With James, she'd wielded truth like a blade, cutting through Langley's facade. The cost was high, sleepless nights, fear of retaliation, but Grace's words had carried her. Make them see. Lena's phone buzzed. Maya, her cousin, her voice warm from Harlem. "You're a legend," Maya said, pride bursting. Lena pictured their tea-fueled dreams of justice, Grace's memory binding them. "Not a legend," Lena replied softly, "just Grace's daughter." She declined TV interviews, letting her work speak, but the world noticed. Carter Analytics surged, its inbox flooded with clients seeking audits, drawn to a firm that toppled giants. That afternoon, Lena visited Grace's grave, the cemetery quiet under a gray sky. She knelt, tracing the headstone, her mother's tired eyes vivid in her mind. "We did it," she whispered, her voice breaking. At 16, she'd watched Grace lose everything to a landlord's lies, their home replaced by Maya's couch. Now, Edward lives in a rented Queens apartment, his fortune gone, his name a curse. Lena's fire had burned for Grace, for every worker crushed by power. She stood, the wind carrying her vow forward. Back at her office, Lena launched a pro bono division for Carter Analytics, mentoring young auditors from marginalized communities. She saw Maria rehired with back pay, and Jamal now leading a workers' rights group, their stories fueling her mission. The Carter Act, new labor protections inspired by her fight, passed in Congress, shielding employees from discriminatory firings. Lena's chest swelled, but she stayed grounded, her mother's lessons her guide. One evening, Lena met James at their Bronx cafe, the espresso's aroma a familiar comfort. "You changed the game," he said, raising a cup. His friend's firing had sparked his fight, but Lena's courage had lit the way. She smiled, her eyes on Grace's photo in her bag. "We did," she said. Their lawsuit had cost Langley billions, its subsidiaries folding under scrutiny. Edward's cronies faced charges, their arrogance no match for truth. Lena walked home, the Bronx's hum a steady pulse. She passed a mural on a corner, freshly painted. A woman with a journal, eyes fierce, labeled The Unseen. Kids pointed, whispering her name. Lena's throat tightened. She wasn't a hero, just a woman who'd seen what others ignored. Her apartment welcomed her, Grace's photo glowing under a lamp. She sat, her journal closed, its pages a testament to years of listening, waiting, striking. Carter Analytics' new office opened downtown, its sign gleaming. Lena hired auditors like herself, Black, Latino, Asian, overlooked but unstoppable. She trained them in her method, cross-referencing chatter with data, seeing the unseen. Emails poured in, workers sharing stories inspired by #LangleyExposed. Lena answered each, her fire spreading. Edward had thought her a prop, a cleaner to be dismissed. He'd learned the cost of underestimating her. Maya called that night, her voice soft. "Aunt Grace would be proud," she said. Lena nodded, clutching Grace's photo. The gala's insult, the blacklist, the smears, they'd forged her, but Grace's dignity had shaped her. As Langley's ruins faded from the news, Lena's legacy grew, a beacon for the silenced, a blade for the powerful. She stood, the Bronx skyline flickering outside, her resolve eternal. Lena Carter walked the Bronx streets, the autumn air crisp, the city's hum a familiar pulse. 5 years had passed since Edward Langley's empire crumbled under her fire, his $400 million fortune reduced to a rented Queens apartment, his name a footnote in disgrace. The #Langley Exposed campaign, fueled by her journal, Rachel Nguyen's article, and James Monroe's lawsuit, had reshaped the corporate world. The Carter Act, born from their fight, now protected workers nationwide, shielding them from discriminatory firings. Lena's office, once a cramped room above a deli, now stood downtown, Carter Analytics sign gleaming, a beacon for the silenced. She paused at a mural on a corner, its colors vivid. A woman with a journal, eyes fierce, labeled The Unseen. Kids pointed, whispering her name, their parents nodding with pride. Lena's throat tightened. She wasn't a hero, just Grace's daughter, carrying her mother's fire. Her See the Unseen philosophy had toppled Langley Enterprises, exposing its fraudulent $10 million contract, bribery with Senator Klein, and memo targeting minority workers. That fight had cost her sleepless nights, Edward's blacklist, his smears. But Grace's words had guided her. They think you're nothing, but you're everything. Make them see. At Columbia University, Lena stood before a packed auditorium, the air heavy with anticipation. The Lena Carter Scholarship, funded by her firm's pro bono division, was launching, offering full rides to underrepresented students. She adjusted her blazer, Grace's photo tucked in her pocket, and spoke. "I was 16, evicted, sleeping on my cousin's couch," she said, her voice steady. "My mother taught me to see the unseen, truths hidden by power. You can too." The crowd erupted, students like Aisha, a young black woman with sharp eyes, clutching applications, inspired to follow Lena's path. Aisha approached after, her voice trembling. "I'm starting an auditing firm because of you," she said. Lena smiled, seeing Grace in Aisha's fire. "Cross-reference everything," she advised. "Chatter, data, patterns. They'll underestimate you. Use it." Aisha nodded, her resolve mirroring Lena's. The scholarship wasn't just money. It was a spark, igniting a generation to challenge power. Lena's phone buzzed as she left. Maya, her cousin, her voice warm from Harlem. "You're changing the world," Maya said, pride bursting. Lena pictured their tea-fueled dreams, Grace's memory binding them. "Just keeping her fire alive," Lena replied, her throat tight. Maya laughed softly. "Aunt Grace is smiling." Lena clutched Grace's photo, its edges worn from years of carrying it. She'd declined TV fame, letting her work speak, but her story had spread. Workers emailing thanks, inspired by #Langley Exposed. That evening, Lena visited Grace's grave, the cemetery quiet under a golden sky. She knelt, tracing the headstone. "We made them see," she whispered, tears falling. At 16, she'd vowed to fight after Grace's eviction, their home lost to a landlord's lies. Now, Edward's ruin and the Carter Act were her victory, but the real triumph was the lives changed. Maria, rehired with back pay. Jamal, leading a workers' rights group. James's friend, honored in new laws. Lena stood, the wind carrying her mother's strength. Carter Analytics thrived, its downtown office bustling with auditors Lena trained. Black, Latino, Asian, overlooked but unstoppable. She taught them her method, listening where others didn't, seeing patterns in data and whispers. Aisha's firm launched, her first case exposing a tech giant's wage theft. Lena mentored her, their late-night calls echoing Maya's support. The mural, the scholarship, the Carter Act, they were ripples, spreading Lena's fire across communities. James met her at their Bronx cafe, the espresso's aroma a familiar comfort. "You didn't just take down Langley," he said, raising a cup. "You rewrote the rules." His friend's firing had sparked his fight, but Lena's courage had lit the way. She smiled, Grace's photo in her bag. "We did," she said. The cafe buzzed with locals, some recognizing her, their nods a quiet salute. Lena walked past the Gala Hotel, now bearing a plaque, "Dedicated to Workplace Justice, inspired by Lena Carter." She paused, her reflection in the glass steady. Edward had seen a cleaner, a black woman, to mock with a $100 bill. He'd learned the cost of underestimating her. Her journal, once her weapon, now rested in a drawer, its coded pages a testament to years of listening, waiting, striking. Back home, Lena sat with Grace's photo, the Bronx skyline flickering outside. The world had changed. Laws passed, voices lifted, systems challenged. She wasn't a legend, just a woman who'd seen the unseen. Greed, lies, oppression. Her fire, Grace's fire, burned in Aisha, in auditors, in workers who'd never be silenced again. As the city hummed, Lena stood, her resolve eternal, a legacy of truth reshaping history.